So we're taking a look at the elbow, okay? The elbow, the function of that back elbow on the top hand in the swing. And this kind of goes back to my background. And everybody's going to struggle. Everybody's going to have a time where they're going through a slump. You're not squaring up baseballs like you should. It's most likely going to be something mental. But typically what coaches will do, will start looking at mechanical things that possibly can change. I've always had what some coaches believe to be a hitch in my swing. I've tried multiple times to correct it. I've never, ever, ever been successful in correcting it. And when I say hitch, coaches would see me get my elbow up, and they thought it was either making me slow to the baseball, I was mishitting baseballs because of it, or whatever that may be. And I've tried numerous things to try to get rid of it completely. I've never, ever been able to get rid of it completely. I've only been able to make adjustments to be able to hit more consistently with it. And some hitters have it and some hitters don't. Some hitters do it, some don't. But what I do see a lot this day and age with instructors and coaches and teaching hitting, we're trying to get players to implement it that can't necessarily do it. You don't have to have a high elbow drop to hit a baseball hard. You don't necessarily have to. There are plenty of good hitters throughout the league in history that have done it without dropping the elbow up. And when I say elbow up, because it can be very subjective, right? Some people might consider this up. Some people might consider this up. Some people might consider this up. It's all subjective. They might not even talk about it unless you're not hitting the baseball, right? But for me, when I look at how high the elbow gets, I'm looking at, is it parallel to the ground, right? If it's going beyond parallel, I consider that high, right? And so for me, some of the struggles that I had, mostly when guys started throwing with a little more velocity, that's when I started to struggle, because when you look at it, that elbow, and this is what we'll be talking about a little bit, that elbow is going to trigger the barrel to tilt a little bit more, right? And one thing you do want to try to be able to get that barrel to a 45-degree angle, but you don't want to go so much that when that bat and that barrel really reverses planes in the swing, that you're missing baseball, especially if you're missing your pitch, then you're completely doing it wrong. Or you need to make an adjustment. If you can't hit with it, an adjustment needs to be made, period, point blank. That's it, right? So for me, when I used to hit, especially when I was younger, I probably did it all the way through college, maybe up until maybe I did it through my senior year. But I typically hit with my hands up pretty high. In college, I started to drop my hands a little bit more. But even with that, I was still going from here to about right there. So when I made the transition to pro ball, it wasn't easy. You know, I was getting beat by a lot of hard stuff, and I knew an adjustment had to be made because I know I could drive baseballs hard. And I needed to make more solid contact. I'm not big enough to miss a baseball and hit it out, right? So when we start looking at this thing, and guys, just explaining like what that does and what the potential is from it, and why you might want to think about implementing, why you might not want to play with it. So for me, it was making my barrel drop, so I was missing pitches. So I was looking at some ways to adjust. I knew I was going to do it anyway. Naturally, my elbow wanted to get up to some degree. So for me, I started looking at, okay, well, what potentially could I do to make an adjustment? And for me, the adjustment, instead of starting here, I would start here. I would start here so that by the time that I landed and I'm trying to attack a baseball, I'm going from here, boom. And I could pretty much trust that it's not going to be up here. I was always trying to get it to about parallel, right? But when we look at this elbow and how it's affecting the swing and what it could potentially do, it can produce more pop for you, right? Think about it like this. It's nothing more. Loading, the simple principle of loading is just negative energy. That's it. Everything, like if I want to throw a punch forward, to go forward, first it must go back. Same thing in the swing. We know that the barrel energy wants to go this way. So first thing it's going to do is reverse action. We know it's going to come here. The first thing it's going to do is go there, right? It just reverses action. Same thing. Don't even pay attention to the barrel, to the bat or the barrel. You can just look at the hands. If we know the hands want to make this movement to get to the baseball, first the hands are typically going to do that, right? So what that's able to do for you, generate a little more load, but ultimately what it boils down to, an object that's in motion inevitably tends to stay in motion, right? And what we don't want to be firing. You're not going to throw a punch like this, right? So naturally, you got that natural cock back and then go forward. So the same thing kind of happens in the swing. Some hitters just tend to do it a lot more naturally than others. I do see it a good amount in like younger hitters for some reason. I think instinctually We want to do it, but not everybody does it, right? So when you're doing that, when those hands go, the barrel is going to go toward more of an acute angle. The more acute that angle gets, that means the longer distance it's going to have to cover to get back, right? So either you're going to have to start your swing earlier, definitely want to start your load sooner, but you got a lot more ground to cover to get back to where you need to be, right? It can also help you get to that 45-degree angle that you're looking to get to, that hitters should be getting to when we hit, right? Generally speaking, if you had about if that elbow is parallel to the ground, you should be at about a 45-degree angle, right? But if you're doing that and you're missing baseballs, you're trying to implement it and you're missing baseballs, either number one, you don't need to be trying to do it, or number two, if you naturally do it, you might want to make some type of adjustment where the elbow starts a little bit lower. So that's an adjustment. That's a key to why you see a lot of people driving that elbow up. And that's just what it is. If you're not struggling with it, especially my coaches, if they're not struggling with it, let them go. Let them swing it. Let them swing it until they start making some mistakes, until an adjustment actually needs to be made. But that's the function of the elbow. And if you need to make any adjustments, make some adjustments, man.